Hello, dear listeners, and welcome to a new episode of our Leonard of Ox podcast. We are launching into a truly massive deep dive today, a journey through the epic landscape of 19th century French idealism and social critique.
It's a huge one.
Right. This source material is this sprawling narrative of injustice, redemption, and profound mercy. It's really one of those famous literary achievements ever conceived.
It is, and it's a story at its core about the miserable, the wretched, the downtrodden, the victims of systemic failure.
And how their lives are all interwoven by fate and choice. It's just incredible.
Absolutely, and I think our mission today isn't just to, summarize the plot. It's to really extract those profound nuggets of knowledge.
The big ideas.
The big ideas, the insights about the nature of justice, the path to redemption through sustained moral effort, and how love acts as this ultimate transformative catalyst. We're really dissecting a society that's wrestling with its own soul in the aftermath of revolution.
And to understand the soul of this story, I think we have to start with its architect, Victor Hugo.
Victor Hugo. He really stands as one of France's most critical literary figures. I mean, no question. He wasn't just a poet, a novelist, a dramatist.
He was a giant.
A giant, exactly. His influence just permeated French political and social life. He was a man defined by this intense humanitarian concern and his political engagement.
What I find so compelling about Victor Hugo's life, his personal life, is how his own trajectory kind of mirrored the moral awakening he was trying to inspire in society. He didn't start out as this champion of the people we think of him as, did he?
That's such a crucial point. No, he started out as a staunch royalist, very conservative, supporting the monarchy.
Right.
But the more he observed the brutal conditions of post-revolutionary France, the crushing poverty, the unforgivable systemic failures, the more he pivoted.
So he evolved.
He evolved. This evolution led him to become a fervent Republican and, well, a passionate advocate for the poor.
And it's so clear that this shift just heavily influenced his work.
Yeah.
This novel isn't just entertainment. It feels like a political manifesto disguised as an epic story.
Exactly. His writing became this massive, sustained critique. He believed the social order itself was fundamentally flawed, that poverty and ignorance, they weren't character defects.
No, they were conditions manufactured by an unjust state.
Precisely. He was arguing that if a society doesn't educate and support its weakest members, it is inevitably responsible for the crime and suffering that follows. And that conviction is the deep thematic bedrock of the entire work.
So let's unpack that. If the social order is flawed, where does the repair even begin? Victor Hugo shows us, and it begins with an act of radical, almost impossible mercy.
It does.
And that's initiated by Monsignor Bienvenu, or Bishop Muriel, in the small town of Digne.
The opening sequence with the bishop's actions, it sets the entire moral benchmark for the novel. It really demonstrates that true charity requires not just, a donation.
Right, not just writing a check.
Not at all. It requires a fundamental inversion of status and wealth.
Yeah.
And to get that, you have to look at the physical contrast between his world and the world of the suffering.
So tell us about that setting. The difference between the palace and the hospital is, it's staggering and so symbolic.
It really is. The episcopal palace was expansive, built in the previous century. It had these grand, beautiful architectural features, arcades, massive gardens filled with magnificent trees.
A height of luxury.
The height of luxury. The dining hall alone was large enough to host 7 revered gentlemen, a dinner so important it was commemorated with an engraved marble tablet. But then, right next door, literally sharing a wall, was the hospital.
And the hospital, I'm guessing, was the complete opposite.
A complete opposite. It was cramped, just a single story with this tiny inadequate garden. And crucially, the sick rooms were small, poorly ventilated.
Oh, wow.
And the beds had to be jammed close together just to fit the 26 patients they had.
And the bishop, he arrives.
Yeah.
And he sees this contradiction just staring him in the face.
Within 3 days of his arrival, yes. He visits the hospital, confirms they have 26 patients crammed into a handful of small rooms, and then he reflects on his own spacious quarters, realizing he could fit 20 beds in his dining hall alone.
And the injustice of it just hits him.
Immediately, he sees the absurdity. He turns to the director and he pronounces, "Here is obviously a mistake."
A mistake. Not a failure of charity, but a failure of logic and morality. That's a powerful way to put it.
Precisely. He says, and this is so direct, there are 26 of you in 5 or 6 small rooms. There were 3 of us with space for 60. That can only be a mistake, I find.
So what's the solution?
So You have my house, and I have yours. That is how it must be. Give me my house back. This one belongs to you.
A total switch.
Just like that.
The sick move into the palace, and the bishop moves into the hospital, willingly embracing those cramped conditions.
Yes.
That's charity applied as, like, practical lived solidarity, not just some distant grant of money.
And this act set the stage for everything else, for how he managed his finances. It demonstrated his refusal to let wealth corrupt his mission. See, his family was ruined by the revolution, so his only income was his official state salary of 15,000 francs.
Which he immediately started giving away.
Immediately. He channeled virtually all of it away from himself.
It's astonishing to see the granularity of his budget. I mean, what were the specific organizations he supported with that money?
He took the substantial sum that was previously designated for his equipage and travel, which was about 3,000 livres, and he meticulously reallocated it.
Okay.
He directed 1,500 livres for bouillon broth, for the hospital, 500 for foundlings, and then 250 each for two different organizations that supported women in childbirth, one in Aix and one in Draguignan.
He essentially turned his salary into a public trust.
That's a perfect way to put it.
And I have to wonder if this level of self-sacrifice wasn't confusing or even suspicious to the people around him who were used to the traditional, hierarchical status of the church.
Oh, it absolutely was confusing. His housekeeper, Madame Magloire, was initially delighted. She thought he was going to keep the 3,000 livres for personal use, thinking finally he's thinking of luxury.
Right.
But when she saw him reallocating it, she was just bewildered. And even more revealing is the story of the cynical traveler who saw the bishop talking to a coachman about the funds.
And what did he think?
He immediately concluded that priests were greedy and avaricious.
Because he assumed the money was being spent on a luxurious carriage. He completely misread the intention, because luxury was the only context he had for a man of the bishop's stature.
It just highlights Victor Hugo's point about prejudice, doesn't it? People so often see what they expect to see, especially when it confirms their existing cynical views about authority. But Muriel operated on this inverted moral code.
And this is where his philosophy really deepens. He wasn't just kind. He fundamentally questioned society's right to judge the poor and the weak.
He maintained that if a child, a woman, a weak person, or an ignorant person commits a sin, the true fault lies with men, parents, employers, the strong, the rich, and the knowledgeable.
So he saw societal neglect as the original sin that led to all the others. If a soul's left in darkness, sin becomes inevitable and society owes a massive debt.
He made that debt explicit. He argued, society loads a great debt upon itself by not providing instruction free of charge.
That statement is so critical, it links ignorance directly to systemic oppression. Crime is shown to be a societal consequence, not a failure of personal willpower.
Right. If you fail to educate people, you create the conditions for their downfall, and then society turns around and punishes them for the predictable results.
We see this critique of the legal system devastatingly laid out in the story of the man who made counterfeit money. It's such a chilling example of the court system weaponizing human emotion.
It is a moment of pure judicial horror. A poor man acting out of this twisted sense of love and desperation for his mistress and their child made false money. He was facing the death penalty.
And the woman wouldn't confess.
She was arrested but refused to confess. So the royal prosecutor, desperate to secure a conviction, fabricated letters to trick the woman into believing her lover was cheating on her.
Wow. So he used her jealousy and her fury, her most vulnerable emotions, to secure her confession, which then condemned the man. That is an act of moral corruption far exceeding the crime of counterfeiting.
And Muriel's response just cuts through the legal cynicism instantly. After listening to the whole tale, he delivers this crushing question. Which court judges this man and this woman, the assizes, and which judges the prosecutor?
It throws the moral weight right back onto the supposedly moral figures of authority who twisted justice for their own procedural ends.
His horror also extended to capital punishment itself.
Mm.
The experience of witnessing an execution, it profoundly impacted his views.
The guillotine.
He couldn't shake the image of the guillotine. He described it not as a passive machine, but as a terrible, sentient monster that eats flesh and drinks blood.
That's horrifying.
It suggested that the act of state-sanctioned killing corrupts the entire society that enacts it. This thought led him to the realization: it is an injustice to think only of divine law and to neglect human law. To decree death is, and the sentence is left unfinished.
But the implication is clear.
Uh-huh.
It's morally indefensible.
Absolutely.
And it's this deep questioning of authority that leads to his critical philosophical debate with a former member of the convention, G, who voted for the death of the king. This is where the competing definitions of tyrant clash.
It's a magnificent scene pitting the bishop's royalist spirituality against this revolutionary idealism. Muriel initially tries to congratulate G for what he thought was a vote against the king's execution.
The G corrects him.
Immediately, he says, "I voted for the death of the tyrant," and then G reframes the whole debate. The king was merely a symptom. The true tyrant is ignorance, which invented kingship and corrupt authority in the first place.
G forces Muriel to confront the limitations of selective compassion, doesn't he? When the bishop mourns the fate of the young Dauphin, Louis XVII, G insists on an equal standard of grief.
G's point is unassailable. He says, "Let us understand each other. Are we weeping for the innocent, all the little martyrs, the low and the high? If so, I will join in. But then we must not stop at 1793. Our tears must begin earlier."
I will mourn the children of the kings with you if you join me in the lament for the children of the people.
It's just so powerful. A powerful argument for universal empathy, demanding that the bishop expand his compassion beyond class lines.
And when Muriel points out G's own wealth and privilege, that he drives a carriage and eats well, G apologizes for having the advantage of comfort, but then pivots again, challenging the bishop's own history.
He delivers the ultimate rhetorical strike. Muriel condemns the ruthlessness of the revolutionaries, like Marat, and G counters by asking, "And what do you think of Bossuet, who celebrated the Protestant massacres with a Te Deum?"
Bringing up the bishop's revered theological hero, Bossuet, in the context of celebrating slaughter, that must have completely silenced Muriel.
It did. It demonstrates that political ruthlessness isn't unique to the revolutionaries. It's a failure of humanity you can find even in the most established moral authorities.
So these principles, this radical mercy, the condemnation of ignorance as the true tyrant, and the failure of rigid human law, they're really the ethical DNA of the story.
They are.
And they set the stage for the dramatic, defining collision between the bishop and the man who needs that mercy most, Jean Valjean.
Yes, Jean Valjean represents the tragic outcome of that societal neglect Muriel condemned. His story is one of relentless suffering and the struggle for rebirth.
Let's talk about his beginnings. He wasn't born a criminal, but was made one by necessity.
Exactly. He was born poor in the Brie region, completely illiterate, and he worked as a tree pruner in Faverolles. He lost both his parents young, leaving him, at barely 25, the sole support for his widowed older sister, Mother Jean, and her 7 young children.
And the work was brutal.
Physically grueling and poorly paid. And you can see that intrinsic goodness, that quiet moral core that existed before the galleys, in the small anecdote about the neighbor's milk.
Right, the children were hungry.
Perpetually hungry. And desperate, they would sneak over to the neighbor, Marie Claude, taking milk on credit, gulping it down before anyone knew. Valjean, seeing their poverty and their shame, secretly paid off the debt, making sure the children were safe from punishment. He was a rough, sullen man on the outside, but inherently good.
And then came the crime, the theft of bread.
His initial sentence was 5 years for burglary, but the real tragedy is the length of his subsequent punishment. He tried to escape 4 times.
4 times.
And the accumulation of those attempted escapes resulted in his sentence being extended by 14 additional years. So he served a grueling total of 19 years in the galleys for a desperate attempt to feed his family.
19 years of systemic dehumanization, all for a loaf of bread, compounded by the crime of just wanting to be free. That's the crushing weight of institutional injustice right there.
And when he is finally released, society doesn't grant him freedom, it brands him. He arrives in D carrying that infamous yellow passport, announcing his status as a former convict, and no one will hire him, no one will house him.
He's legally a free man, but functionally he's an outcast.
Completely. It's only through this almost miraculous intervention of fate that he finds Muriel's door. He's sleeping rough when a marquise tells him where to go.
And Valjean, who's been conditioned by years of rejection, he immediately presents his status, right? He pulls out the yellow document.
He does. He states he has 109 francs, all he earned over 2 decades, and he fully expects the bishop to drive him away. He tells Muriel, "I was firmly convinced you would drive me away. That is why I immediately told you who I am."
But the bishop's response is the first true act of welcome Valjean has experienced in 2 decades. He tells his housekeeper, Madame Magloire, cover the bed in the alcove with new sheets.
And Valjean is just utterly shattered by this acceptance. He's given warmth, a chair, and a dinner served not with cheap metalware, but with 6 massive silver settings and a ladle.
He's a forced laborer.
Muriel, feigning confusion, looks at Madame Magloire and asks, "Was our silver?" And Valjean is terrified. Then the bishop claims he gave Valjean the silver. He says, "You should have stayed. Why did you not take the candlesticks too? They are silver. You should have used this money to become an honest man."
He transforms a legal crime into a sacred debt of conscience, an obligation to virtue. He even redefines the silver as belonging to the poor, not himself.
Yes, he tells his housekeeper that they should have been content with pewter or iron utensils.
Right.
He even concludes, referring to the iron, that it tastes better, or Eisenschmeckt, demonstrating that true spiritual sustenance comes from simplicity, not luxury. The act of mercy is complete. But the transformation, that's only just beginning.
That's where the subsequent scene with the young Savoyard, Petit Gervais, is so insightful. Valjean immediately backslides, stealing a small 40-sou coin from the boy.
It shows that even after receiving the most monumental moral gift, the reflexes of desperation and the conditioning of the prison system are still active. He steals the coin, and though it's a petty amount, the act shocks him into a deeper realization of what he has become.
He tries to return it.
He can't find the boy to return the coin, but the experience forces him to choose. Will he remain the convict, or will he commit to the path the bishop laid out for him?
And he chooses the path of sustained moral effort, which leads to the birth of Père Madeleine in Montreuil-sur-Mer after 1815.
He establishes himself under this assumed name, Père Madeleine. His first visible act is one of immense bravery, rescuing children from a fire at the town hall. That helped distract anyone who might have recognized him or asked for a passport.
And he dedicates himself to philanthropy and industry, essentially recreating the economic health of the whole town.
He established these wildly successful jet bead workshops, and he kept them strictly segregated, one for men, one for women and girls, to uphold morality in what was a busy garrison town. His arrival eliminated unemployment and misery. He wasn't just wealthy, he was transformative.
And he was actively investing his wealth back into the community.
Absolutely. He amassed a fortune, depositing 630,000 francs at Lafitte, but he spent millions improving the city. He donated 10 new hospital beds, established 2 new schools, paid teacher salaries double the official rate.
And he started a kindergarten.
He did. He innovated by establishing a kindergarten, something almost unheard of in France at that time. He believed the nurse and the schoolmaster were the state's 2 most important officials.
But his rapid success and his philanthropic nature, it provoked suspicion from the established elite.
Oh, definitely. He was initially seen as a schemer, then an ambition seeker. When he consistently refused honors, they called him an adventurer. And because he was illiterate and avoided social gatherings, they questioned if he could read, eventually labeling him an uneducated lout.
They just couldn't place him in their rigid social hierarchy.
Not at all. He only accepted the mayoralty in 1820, reluctantly, convinced by an old worker that a good mayor is genuinely useful.
He accepted the office as another act of service, not ambition. However, his past, the yellow passport, it remained a silent, constant threat, personified by the unwavering Javert.
Oh, Javert.
Javert represents the antithesis of Muriel, doesn't he? He is the law made flesh-rigid, unforgiving, unable to accept change or redemption.
Javert held this intense, almost physical antipathy toward Madeleine. He sensed an unsettling, animalistic connection he couldn't explain. He just couldn't reconcile the moral pillar of the town with the criminal he believed lurked beneath.
And the moment that cements Javert's suspicion is the dramatic rescue of old Fauchelevent.
Yes. Fauchelevent, the cart driver, was crushed beneath a massive, heavy cart that not even a jack could budge. Madeleine, after failing to buy assistance, knelt down and, through sheer, almost superhuman force.
The strength he honed working 19 years as a galley slave.
Exactly. He lifted the crushing weight alone. And Javert, who witnessed this physical feat, was instantly certain. He remarked that he knew only one single man who could replace a winch, and that was a galley slave.
So the very strength of the convict, developed in prison, becomes the telltale sign that exposes the virtuous mayor. It's a tragic irony.
It is. And we should note, Madeleine further boosted his status subtly by mourning Bishop Muriel's death in 1821, wearing black and a mourning veil, which led many to believe they were relatives. He later corrected this, saying he was in the service of his family, but the moral connection was made in the public eye.
Don't forget to subscribe and leave a like if you enjoy this deep dive. Okay, we shift now to Fantine, who represents the collateral damage of societal indifference, the very kind of misery Muriel argued society owed a debt to. Her descent is just horrifying.
Fantine's initial Parisian life in 1817 was carefree but naive. She was part of a double quartet, 4 students, including Tholomyès, and 4 working-class sweethearts. She held on to illusions of love that the others, more worldly, had already shed.
And her undoing is orchestrated through this cruel joke called the surprise.
Yes, the 4 students organize a country outing and then just abandon the girls, leaving only a cynical letter. Tholomyès was Fantine's lover, and she was left alone and, crucially, pregnant with Cosette.
So 10 months later, driven by shame and poverty, she has to leave Paris. She could barely read or write and couldn't find employment.
And her desperation forces her into the hands of the Thénardier near Montfermeil in 1818. This couple represents the corruption of both the lower and middle classes.
Victor Hugo meticulously describes the Thénardiers as this dangerous hybrid. They combine the vices of the lower class with the defects of the middle class, which makes them uniquely predatory.
Monsieur Thénardier is a rogue. The woman is coarse and cruel. They are immediately alert to opportunity. They see Cosette not as a child, but as an asset to exploit.
So Fantine entrusts the toddler Cosette to them, paying 80 francs up front.
And the Thénardiers are delighted. The husband immediately comments, "Now I will finally pay the 110 francs, a debt that was about to be protested." It shows their instant reliance on exploiting the weak. He congratulates his wife for having baited him well with your little ones, referring to their own daughters, Eponine and Azelma, used as bait.
So Fantine eventually finds work in Montreuil-sur-Mer at Père Madeleine's factory, but she has to hide her motherhood. But the environment of gossip proves fatal.
The gossip, led by the envious Frau Victunian, is relentless. The factory supervisor, a woman Madeleine trusted to enforce moral order, discovered Fantine's letters to the Thénardier demanding money, and the supervisor, applying this rigid, judgmental morality, dismissed Fantine without consulting the mayor.
And that's a critical point. Madeleine's system of philanthropy failed because of the unchecked moralistic judgment of his staff.
Exactly. And Fantine's descent just spirals. She can't find new work, facing threats from her landlord and furniture dealer, and the Thénardiers keep escalating their demands.
They're constantly demanding more money, claiming Cosette had a severe illness, a high fever, free cell fever, and needed 40 francs for medicine, which was a completely fraudulent demand.
Right. And this leads to her tragic series of sacrifices. She sells her identity, bit by bit.
First, her hair.
She sells her magnificent blonde hair first, hoping to appease them. Then she sells her 2 front teeth, an act that irrevocably destroys her physical beauty and impacts her ability to eat and speak normally. It demonstrates the extreme physiological toll of her financial desperation.
And finally,
driven to her wit's end by a 100-franc debt demand from Thénardier, she screams, "Ausverkauf!" total clearance sale, and turns to prostitution.
and this desperate ruin leads directly to her conflict with Javert.
Fantine is arrested by Javert for attacking an honest man, Bamatabois, after he insulted her. Javert, operating purely by codified law, is ready to sentence her immediately to 6 months in prison. She's weak, feverish, near death, yet the law demands punishment.
But Mayor Madeleine intervenes, creating the perfect confrontation of ideologies.
Madeleine orders her immediate release, promising to pay her debts and care for Cosette. Javert is utterly shocked. This is an official of the law, the mayor overriding the rigid application of the code.
Which he can't handle.
He can't. Unable to contain his internal conflict, he blurts out his suspicion to the mayor. He believes Madeleine is the escaped convict, Jean Valjean.
This sets the stage for Valjean's true moral test, the Champmathieu case.
Yes. Javert has received word that a small-time thief, Champmathieu, has been arrested and identified as Valjean. So Madeleine must decide. Let an innocent man suffer in his place, thereby preserving his own life, his reputation, and the financial stability of the town he created.
Or sacrifice everything he has built.
It's the ultimate choice between self-preservation and the profound moral debt he owes to Muriel. He chooses sacrifice, traveling to the court in Arras.
And the court scene is one of the novel's most dramatic moments. Madeleine interrupts the trial, where 3 former galley mates, Brevet, Chenildieu, and Cochepaille, are testifying, falsely identifying Champmathieu using old convict marks.
They're relying on circumstantial details and physical resemblance. But Valjean proves his identity by revealing intimate, verifiable details of their shared imprisonment, facts only the true convict would know.
What kind of details?
He points out Brevet's specific tricotine braces with the chessboard pattern. He challenges Chenaudu about the self-inflicted brand on his right shoulder, the letters TFP, Travaux forcés à perpétuité, or forced labor for life,
Wow.
which Chenaudu admits to. And finally, he orders Cochepaille to roll back his sleeve to reveal the blue ink tattoo next to the artery on his left arm. The exact date of Napoleon's landing in Cannes, March 1st, 1815.
That detailed confession, using minute physical evidence only the incarcerated would know, it creates an absolute grave silence in the courtroom. It's an act of moral certainty that creates a religious shiver among the witnesses.
Madeleine reveals himself. I am the man you were looking for. I am Jean Valjean. He is immediately arrested, while the astonished Champmathieu is set free.
But Valjean rushes immediately back to Fantine's bedside at the hospital.
He tries desperately to assure the feverish Fantine that Cosette is coming, but Fantine, weakened and in delirium, is clinging to his promise, and her peace is brutally shattered when Javert arrives for the final arrest.
Javert, relentless in his adherence to the law, grabs Valjean by the collar, declaring, "There is no mayor here anymore."
And Fantine witnesses this betrayal, the collapse of her savior and the only source of hope for her daughter. She shrieks, "Herr Bürgermeister!" and dies immediately from the shock and fever. Her tragedy is complete. She never sees her daughter again, and her final moments are witnessing the triumph of rigid law over mercy.
The tragedy of Fantine propels Valjean into the second phase of his redemption, fulfilling his sacred promise to her. This means rescuing Cosette and then living a life of hiding and sacrifice, which eventually brings him to the orbit of Marius.
First, the rescue. In Montfermeil in 1823, 8-year-old Cosette is living a wretched, enslaved existence. She is forced to fetch water from the distant Shell Spring deep in the silent, dark forest, carrying a massive bucket larger than herself.
Valjean, having staged his death during an incident aboard the prison ship, Orion, which allowed him to escape the galleys yet again, is searching for her, and he encounters her struggling in the dark.
Valjean, now financially independent from the fortune he secretly amassed as Père Madeleine, carries the massive bucket for her. When they return to the inn, he observes the Thénardier's cruelty.
And the Thénardiers, seeing him, immediately assess his worth, believing him to be only a Herr Habenix, a penniless gentleman, just because he helped the child.
They can't conceive that someone wealthy would perform such a basic act of compassion, and Valjean's act of kindness is confirmed when he buys Cosette the magnificent, expensive doll displayed in the booth.
An act of generosity that only infuriates the Thénardiers, who only see the money escaping their grasp.
Exactly. Valjean secures Cosette by paying Thénardier a monumental sum 1,500 francs up front, plus another 1,000, confirming the arrangement with Fantine's written instructions. He flees with Cosette to Paris, dedicating his life to her education and safety, eventually settling in the secluded Rue Plumet.
And this move is critical because it introduces the tension of love into Valjean's life. Cosette is growing up beautifully, transforming into a young woman and attracting the attention of Marius.
Marius is the quintessential philosophical dreamer, grappling with his fractured family legacy, and he finds this sudden, overwhelming infatuation with the young woman he sees in the Luxembourg Gardens, whom he knows only as Ursule or Leblanc's daughter.
And Valjean, who had sacrificed everything for Cosette, grows acutely anxious. His old white hair contrasts with her new radiance. He is consumed by paranoia that this growing independence and love will expose them both.
And in a stunning twist of fate, Javert reappears, not to arrest Valjean, but to send a covert warning about Marius' scrutiny.
So Valjean interprets this scrutiny as a direct threat. In 1829-1830, he immediately relocates them to the hermetically sealed safety of the Rue Plumet, cutting off all contact with the outside world, including Marius.
This relocation separates the lovers, but fate brings Marius into the immediate orbit of the Thénardiers, now living in the Gorbeau tenement next door, operating as the criminal Jondrette family.
The Thénardiers are professional beggars and con artists, and Marius, peering through a hole in the wall separating their apartments, overhears the Jondrette family plotting a scheme, an ambush against a wealthy philanthropist, Leblanc, who is due to visit them.
This creates Marius' central dilemma because he realizes who the target truly is.
Jondrette begins speaking of the past, and Marius is horrified to realize that Leblanc is the man he knows as Cosette's adoptive father, Valjean.
Right, and Marius is caught between his love for Cosette and his duty to the law. He's already alerted Javert to the Jondrette's suspicious activity even before knowing the target.
The ambush is brutal and calculated. Jondrette, who is Thénardier, traps Valjean, demands money, and falsely claims to be a man who saved Valjean's life at Waterloo.
Thénardier demands 200,000 francs. Valjean, showing his criminal cunning developed in the galleys, demands time to fetch the money, stalling the gang. He even burns his arm on an iron to create a plausible wound, a strategy to gain trust and time.
And while Valjean is stalling, Marius makes a crucial intervention. He throws the police warning note, which he received from Javert, through the wall into the room.
And this note, intended to warn Valjean, ultimately seals the fate of the Thénardier. Javert and his squad burst in just as the gang is attempting to escape via a rope ladder in the chimney. Javert is triumphant, arresting the entire crew, although Thénardier, the master manipulator, manages to escape by immediately changing into a working man's clothes.
The story then accelerates into the political turbulence of 1832. The death of General Lamarck sparks the June uprising.
The city just erupts. Students, workers, radicals mobilize. The funeral procession is the ignition point leading to the construction of barricades, the most famous being on the Rue de la Chanvrerie.
And Marius, heartbroken and believing he has lost Cosette forever, joins his radical friends, Enjolras, Courfeyrac, at the barricade, explicitly seeking death.
And this is where he encounters Éponine, who has followed him in a scene of tragic, selfless love.
Éponine, who had stalked both Marius and Cosette, meets Marius near the barricade. She reveals she had intercepted and withheld Cosette's letter to him. A letter meant to draw Marius into Thénardier's ambush plot, but she kept it out of jealousy.
And then, in the ultimate act of sacrifice, she jumps directly in front of a soldier's rifle aimed at Marius, saving his life.
Her dying wish is heartbreaking.
Yeah.
It just confirms her own tragic existence.
She asks for a kiss on the forehead, reveals her sad, secret love for him, and finally gives him Cosette's letter. Her death is a pure sacrifice for the happiness of the man who never loved her.
And Éponine's letter sets the stage for Valjean's final grand sacrifice.
Valjean finds the clue in Cosette's letter scene reflected in a mirror at Rue de l'Homme Armé, which leads him to realize Cosette loves Marius. Driven by the need to save the man Cosette loves, Valjean appears at the barricade in a National Guard uniform, bringing a fifth uniform to aid in the escape of a comrade.
The moment is chaotic. Valjean's appearance is almost spectral, but his goal is clear: save Marius, his romantic rival.
When the final assault comes, Marius is wounded and unconscious. Valjean takes his moment. He drags Marius's body into the immense labyrinthine sewers of Paris, the ultimate underground refuge, symbolizing the dark, hidden suffering Valjean has endured for 19 years.
The journey through the sewer is the ultimate metaphor for Valjean's life, carrying the burden of his rival, navigating filth and darkness, seeking the light of redemption. And there he faces his final demon, Thénardier.
Thénardier, having escaped earlier, is also maneuvering through the sewer system. He encounters Valjean struggling under the weight of Marius's unconscious body. And in a brilliant piece of dramatic irony, Thénardier mistakes Valjean for a murderer and Marius for his wealthy victim.
And Thénardier, ever the opportunist, immediately attempts to extort money.
He demands half share, part in exchange for helping Valjean unlock the sewer gate. While assisting, Thénardier secretly steals Valjean's money, his wallet, and a piece of cloth cut from Marius's coat, believing he has secured evidence of a murder and a share of the loot.
As Valjean emerges from the darkness, exhausted, he is immediately confronted by Javert.
Javert, on patrol, is stunned. A former convict, emerging from the sewer, holding a wounded, rich young man. All signs point to crime. Yet Valjean honors Javert's rigid sense of order by asking for time to return Marius to his grandfather, Gillenormand.
Javert, still adherent to the letter of the law, follows him, but allows him the courtesy. Valjean returns Marius. He then asks Javert for one last courtesy, seeing Cosette one final time.
Javert agrees, and in that moment, his world shatters. The man he pursued for 19 years, the embodiment of evil under his legal code, has repeatedly demonstrated radical mercy, honor, and self-sacrifice, culminating in the rescue of a young man he didn't even like.
He realizes his entire worldview. It's a lie.
It is. The conflict between Muriel's expansive mercy and Javert's inflexible law destroys Javert. Unable to reconcile the good actions with the criminal identity, and unable to function in a world where good and evil are not neatly categorized by statutes, he disappears. The Toulon Journal later reports a body found caught on the arsenal pillars, implying his suicide.
The law, unredeemable itself, destroyed itself.
That's a perfect way to say it.
So Marius recovers and marries Cosette. Valjean is given a comfortable room in the Gillenormand house, But the final, crushing confrontation awaits.
Valjean knows he can't live a lie. He uses the excuse of a bandaged thumb to avoid signing the marriage documents as faux charbon, which would be forgery, to finally reveal his true history to Marius.
The confession is blunt. I am a galley slave.
Mhm.
He clarifies he isn't Cosette's biological father, only a man who loves her deeply, explaining he faked the injury to avoid committing forgery and invalidating the marriage contract.
And Marius's reaction is immediate and painful: repulsion and suspicion. He believes Valjean must have obtained his fortune dishonestly, tainted by his criminal past. He coldly instructs Valjean to choose his reward for managing Cosette's money so well, implicitly confirming their separation.
The cruel separation begins. Marius suggests it would be best if Valjean no longer saw Cosette frequently, and Valjean acquiesces, reducing his visits until he stops entirely, retreating to his lonely, cold, dirty room on the Rue de l'Homme Armé.
Cosette, caught in her newly married bliss, is confused by her adoptive father's strange behavior, suspecting he's angry at her happiness. This isolation accelerates Valjean's final decline. He is dying, but still driven by conscience. He murmurs to himself, "My happiness was the goal of my life. Now God can call me home. Cosette, you are happy. My time is done."
And the ultimate revelation, which brings Marius to understanding, comes, ironically, from the source of all the misery, the escaped Thénardier.
Thénardier reappears, intending to extort money from Marius by claiming Valjean is a murderer. He attempts to prove Valjean killed a wealthy man in the sewer by showing Marius the piece of cloth he stole from the body.
But in trying to prove a murder, Thénardier accidentally reveals the truth.
He reveals that Valjean was saving a wounded man, Marius, and that the police inspector, Javert, committed suicide. The physical evidence, the coat fragment, is revealed to be the very one Marius wore.
So Marius is instantly overwhelmed with remorse, finally grasping the monumental, lifelong scope of Valjean's sacrifice. He and Cosette race to Valjean's cold, isolated bedside.
Yes, and in the final scene, Valjean dies in peace, having given his blessing and his money entirely to the newly formed couple. He dies knowing Cosette is happy, and that the man she loves now understands the true nature of the man who bore the stigma of the yellow passport. The sacrifice is complete.
This has been an absolutely exhaustive and incredibly emotional deep dive into the essence of Victor Hugo's genius. The journey from the bishop's radical mercy to Valjean's final, selfless act is truly profound. Let's distill the central statements of this massive text for our listeners.
We have three key takeaways that I think really define the moral landscape of this novel. First, redemption is a choice. Jean Valjean's life demonstrates that transformation is profoundly possible through sustained moral effort, regardless of institutional judgment. His life proves that moral effort can overcome the crushing weight of systemic injustice, 19 years in the galleys, and society's refusal to forgive a past identity. Second, the tyrant is ignorance. Social problems, poverty, crime, the exploitation that led to Fantine's ruin, they're not individual failures. They are the inevitable consequence of a society that fails to uplift and educate its weakest members. It's a powerful echo of Muriel's belief that society owes a massive debt by not providing instruction free of charge. And third, true justice is compassion. The essential conflict between Javert's unyielding, rigid law and the boundless, expansive mercy embodied by Muriel and Valjean. It highlights that genuine humanity requires more than just codified statutes. It demands radical empathy and sacrificial love, which ultimately proved powerful enough to destroy Javert's rigid, uncompassionate worldview.
And here's a provocative closing thought for you to carry forward after this deep dive. Consider how often in modern life we judge people based on their history or their status, the very way Javert and the townspeople judge Jean Valjean. If an individual dedicates their life entirely to virtue and self-sacrifice, as Valjean did, does society ever truly manage to forgive their past? Or does the mark of the yellow passport, the old criminal identity, always remain visible, even when worn over a mayor's coat?